Formation and Discipleship Coordinator for the Quad-Parishes here in Green Bay. It was just about a week ago. I had put out a poll on Facebook asking people, kind of what video series or what topic they would like to see discussed in a video series. And not a lot of answers were received, but the majority was the Eucharist, the real presence of Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the most holy sacrament of the Eucharist. And I do want to explain, about half a year ago, a little bit longer, I had a friend, they asked me if I could just write them a little paragraph about the Eucharist and how they're kind of struggling with the idea at the time, and so I took that. It became a 54-page paper, but so what I'm presenting to you, I'm actually presenting a kind of a watered down or a more easily explained version of the paper that I've written. So I will be looking over to the right a little bit, just so you know what I'm doing. So one of the most common objections or accusations that I hear as a Catholic scholar is that Catholics, we're just cannibals, because the Old Testament, it says that you are not to eat the flesh or anything that has blood in it of another, of a living being. So therefore we must be cannibals, right? And as an apologist, it's someone who defends the faith. So as an apologist, I also hear a lot of claims that the Eucharist is nowhere in the Bible. We just, Emperor Constantine, when he took over, he made Catholicism and he threw it in there. He threw out this idea of the Eucharist. And so, over this series, it's going to be a long one, but in advance I appreciate your patience and your attention to this series. But we're going to break down every possible objection we can. I want to explain my way of thinking thus far. I'd confidently argue that there are certain topics, certain themes that require very reverent and respectful instruction. An essay, it can, admittedly, and if I were just to read strictly an essay, it would be very hostile to what's called the Socratic method, and that it requires kind of a back and forth dialogue, and it hones critical thinking. And that's why I approach debates with what I would call parallel substantiation. And this technique, it offers multiple explanations for the same topic at hand, but it's unique because each explanation is independently secure. So, most arguments, they require that one truth, we'll say A, truth A, requires also truth B to yield to equal the valid argument of C. So C, if and only if truth A and truth B. The parallel substantiation, it allows for truth A and or truth B to equal the valid argument of C. So you can refute multiple arguments that I'll put forward, but if even one is left, then the Church's teaching still stands very strong. I sprinkle my talks with Socratic prose, but I do so with parallel substantiation, because I like to kind of proactively address all potential objections to the topic at hand. St. Thomas Aquinas, actually, he borrowed this method from the Muslim philosopher Ibn Rushd, who he called the commentator in his Summa Theologica. Now, a dangerous style of learning, it's when studying theology or philosophy specifically, they set their own rules, they set their own boundaries, and they guide their own instruction. So they're like, all right, this path sounds good, I'm going to go with that. And it can result in what's called gymnobiblism. And gymnobiblism it's the belief that anyone at all, doesn't matter if you're uneducated, if you're a doctor, but you're a doctor, like a medical doctor, that you can read the Bible and you can, with complete accuracy, ascertain and figure out your own personal theological truths, but the Bible isn't always, it's not very, doesn't allow that many, does not allow that much freedom in that regard. And this open style of learning, admittedly, it's what led me myself to distance myself from the Catholic faith about 4 years ago, because I'd returned to open-mindedness after years and years of let's call it anti-authoritarian angst, and I wanted to make sure, though, coming back to the idea of faith, I wanted to make sure I didn't just fall back into Christianity purely out of familiarity. So I studied countless fields of science and logic and world religions to conclude that Christianity, it was the only valid reality. By necessity, it had to be the right one. At the same time, though, I wanted to see what was so special about Catholicism with which I was raised. Because, Presbyterian churches, Martin Luther, John Calvin, a lot of, I'll just say angry websites, they insist that the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, is the whore of Babylon, which is mentioned in the book of Revelation. The Westminster Confession of Faith, that actually it says that the Pope is the Antichrist because he seeks to uproot and usurp the throne of Jesus. And while both of these accusations, they can be dismissed if you have, just some knowledge of basic Koine biblical Greek grammar and an accurately translated Bible. But I didn't have these at the time, so admittedly I kind of gave credence to their misguided claims at first. I read the Gospels without any context, and I often bought into what's called an argument from silence. This argument, it's seen as a logical error, is the claim that if something is not explicitly, word for word, black and white, it is not explicitly stated, then it cannot be true in any sense. We don't see the word Trinity in the Bible, so it can exist. And actually the monarchians, they're called monarchians, they taught that in the early centuries. English translation of the Bible, it never says that Mary is the mother of God, the Theotokos, so how dare Catholics bow down in such idolatry? And I rallied around these ideas. They just made sense in English. They're just obvious until I discovered the joy of what's called Greek hermeneutics. And hermeneutics are different interpretations of biblical text. And suddenly, as soon as I discovered, I looked at the root of all of these things, I realized there was so much more than just what I saw at face value. Every evangelical accusation, it just crumbled as I sought out, the historical context of all these verses that seemed like they were against Catholic teaching. And I realized that what I'll call neo-Protestants, newer Protestants, they dismiss entire passages just to affirm their already decided conclusion. Such as the claim that salvation cannot be lost, even if we live a life of just unrepentant sin. Interestingly, I will say, this is not going to be an anti-Protestant series. Protestant brothers and sisters are completely welcome, and this is for you, so that you can see the beauty of the sacrament. And case in point, Martin Luther, actually, I'll call him kind of an MVP of this series. He was a firm defender of the real presence in the Eucharist, which is obviously a good focus here. A lot of people, there are still some people that they believe he taught something called consubstantiation, but that was actually from John Calvin and the early 20th century's Catholic Encyclopedia. It claims that he taught consubstantiation, but that's been addressed since. My introduction to this video, it's very long-winded, but I'm just doing it for the sake of building up to the beautiful truth, which I hope to explain in reverent detail, which is the true and absolute presence of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist. When preparing this video, I pored over dozens and dozens and dozens of evangelical objections to this teaching of this real presence. And in doing so, though, I realized there was really only one barrier that caused such an anti-Catholic polemic, an anti-Catholic mindset. That's just misunderstanding of some terms, very basic terms. And this, distinction of ideals, it seems to be forced, because I learned all you have to do as someone defending the real presence, you have to take the single verse that you are going to be given. They will throw a verse at you, right? So you take that verse. All you have to do, read one verse prior to or one verse there and after, and you'll see it doesn't fit. You'll see it does not work as a counter argument. And we see the message that Jesus, he didn't speak by symbolism, metaphor, or coy analogy, but in a very literal and purposeful way. And yet, when someone approaches someone who pays no heed to the original context of Scripture, contra principia negantem non est disputandum, there can be no debate with those who deny foundation. And so I hope to explore the foundation. I hope to convince those who doubt of the truth, the veracity behind the Eucharist in the Bible. And to do so, I'm going to present 4 arguments for the absolute presence of Christ in the most holy sacrament. I want to do an argument, one of biblical support, Old Testament and New Testament. I want to do one looking at the viewpoints of the earliest church fathers, the first Christians, the leaders of early Christianity. I want to look at the philosophical possibility of such an event occurring, because I will say, God, he will not go against logic. He will not go against what metaphysically, philosophically must occur, what must be the case. And so if we discover that transubstantiation cannot happen, then it doesn't work. And God would not do that if it could not work. And finally, I want to do an argument of some very scientifically verified Eucharistic miracles. My hope is that all proverbial stones are going to be effectively unturned, leaving no escape for the creeping doubts and the prowling questions that lurk under each one. So I thank you so much for joining us at the Quad-Parishes on this journey. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want references, verses, if you just want my original paper, please let me know. We'll figure out a way to get everything to you, or just leave a little comment. And yeah, so blessings to you all, truly. I will pray for you, and I just ask that if you get a moment, you pray for me as well.